What is a cinematic universe? Well, what probably comes to your mind first is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which currently boasts 20 movies and counting. Or maybe you thought of their competitor, the DC Extended Universe. The list goes on, from the Jurassic World series to the Lego Cinematic Universe to Disney's Star Wars movies. It's the hit trend of the past decade, with these franchises producing movies and TV shows that range from the good to the downright embarrassing. A few of you may even remember the also-successful Dark Universe, starting with 2017's The Mummy. And if you do remember, you probably wish you didn't. But today we're here to talk about one of the more unusual cinematic universes to hit theaters, the M. Night Shyamalan Cinematic Universe. Welcome to a new episode of Take Two. Now I know Shyamalan has his haters, and they're probably thinking, why should I care about a film series from this guy? Didn't he make The Happening?
What? No.
And didn't he pollute cinemas with his terrible live-action take on that one universally beloved cartoon? And well, sure, it's no secret that Shyamalan has had his missteps. That being said, there's no reason to ignore the recent praise his latest releases have received, and the hype that his next film has been getting. Glass, Shyamalan's anticipated follow-up to Unbreakable and Split, is the third movie in the newly cemented Shyamalan Cinematic Universe, also known as the Unbreakable series. But before we can get into that, let's examine the history of cinematic universes themselves. The first generally recognized cinematic universe is the Universal Monster franchise. From Universal Studios, a fitting name for the first studio to produce a cinematic universe, its earliest entries date all the way back to the 1930s. So yeah, that means this originated from this. Universal's franchise kicked off with 1931's Dracula, and then continued by introducing more monsters like Frankenstein and the Wolfman. However, it wasn't until Frankenstein meets the Wolfman in 1943 that these monsters finally met up. Several team-up movies followed, from House of Dracula to House of Frankenstein to Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. But when director Todd Browning first rolled cameras on Dracula, did he expect it to become a monster of a franchise? Well, no. Dracula was just a horror film based off a play, based off a book. It just happened to get a few follow-ups. The concept of a crossover series didn't even exist at that time. It came out naturally through the combination of the studio's most popular monsters. Now let's go back to the future, with Shyamalan's career taking off after doctoring the script for teen rom-com She's All That, and then penning the screenplay for Stuart Little. Really? That's a true fact. Look it up. Despite these successful features and the release of a few of his own directed films, what really put M. Night on the map was a little film called The Sixth Sense. In the movie, we follow Cole, a boy who, sees dead people. He meets Malcolm, a down-on-his-luck psychologist, and the two come together to uncover the truth behind the tormented souls that haunt the young boy. The Sixth Sense would go on to be a huge success, rising above the crowd not only through its iconic moments and twists, but also with the great directorial craftsmanship M. Night displayed. For instance, he'd utilize the cinematography to generate a visceral feeling of fear. The camera will hold uncomfortably long on a shot, like here for instance, as Cole encounters a vomiting ghost. M. Night combines this with the frequent use of POV shots to put us directly in the characters' eyes, uncovering the horror precisely as they do. Overall, the cinematography is relatively simple, but effective, serving the film's suspenseful atmosphere and ominous tone. But The Sixth Sense wasn't just a horror film. The movie is also a brilliant character study, following the skeptical Malcolm, who eventually has to come to believe in Cole, and then, in a shocking twist ending, discovers an unknown truth about himself. And on the flip side, we follow Cole, who starts off scared and coy, but goes on to tackle his greatest fears. M. Night's strong writing and great performances landed The Sixth Sense nominations for Best Picture, Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress, Best Director, alongside Best Editing and Best Original Score. Second only to The Phantom Menace in terms of grossing for 1999, The Sixth Sense was a critical and financial success, an absolute feat of the industry. Shyamalan's next film, Unbreakable, is now retroactively the first film in his cinematic universe. However, it did not receive an equal level of attention upon release, despite being significant in its own right. The lead character, David, meets comic book art dealer Elijah Price, who believes that David has superpowers. Although skeptical at first, David gradually comes to accept his powers. Despite the superhero premise, though, the movie is the farthest thing tonally from something like Superman 78. Unbreakable's low-key cinematography and unique color palette visually separate the film from your average caped vigilante feature. This works because the plot of Unbreakable is essentially the superhero story deconstructed. The film's self-aware nature of the superhero tropes diverges from the larger-than-life status quo among most all superhero films. This is shown in comic book fanatic Price, who references comics as if they were prophetic, as well as the realistic portrayal of characters' personal issues, like David's decaying marriage. M. Night gives us one of the most interesting takes on the genre to ever hit theaters. Furthermore, Shyamalan's craftsmanship is as masterful as it was in The Sixth Sense. He still brings an unexpectedly dark, moody, and realistic aesthetic to the film, avoiding the outlandish and striking look of your average MCU film. And obviously, M. Night wouldn't forget to include his classic twist ending, which this time around is still genuinely unexpected and compelling, giving Elijah Price's nickname Mr. Glass a horribly dark connotation. Both in style and substance, Unbreakable breaks down and subverts the tropes of superhero films, developing a thrilling and suspenseful story about believing in one's personal strength. But having touched on his two biggest hits, that unfortunately leaves us with the question, what went wrong? Truth be told, his misfires have many of the same ingredients as his success stories. They generally have lead characters grappling with issues of faith. The Village follows a blind woman who struggles to have faith in the leaders of her mysterious community. The Happening and After Earth both revolve around protagonists who need to have faith within the context of a relationship. Elliot must have faith in his possibly unfaithful wife, Alma, and Kitai Rage must have faith in his injured father, Cypher Rage. Not joking about that name, by the way. These are still Shyamalan's films through and through, retaining his eerie tone, shadowy cinematography, long takes, and of course, trademark twist endings. Although at this point in his career, twist endings had become his calling card to the point of parody.
What a twist!
A fair amount of the blame for why these films don't work can be placed at the feet of the scripts, which feel rushed and unfinished with clunky dialogue. But really, it's the absolutely lackluster performances that kill these films. Mark Wahlberg almost seems to be acting ironically in The Happening.
What? No.
Bryce Dallas Howard, now hit star of the Jurassic World franchise, barely leaves an impression in The Village and Lady in the Water. And lastly, Will Smith, putting on a terrible quasi-Australian accent is an objectively horrible idea. The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable were both carried by strong lead performances from Bruce Willis, but M. Night's following work, not so much. Despite the obvious issues around the man, Mel Gibson does give a good performance as the quintessential Shyamalan character, Graham Hess, a disillusioned reverend who only finds his faith by the end. Joaquin Phoenix also offers decent support, playing his brother, Merrill. So now, having detailed his tragic downfall from glory, why is the M. Night Shyamalan cinematic universe something to actually get excited about? Well, one of the main problems people seem to have with something like the Marvel Cinematic Universe is that many of its films can feel forgettable or episodic. Now recall the Universal Monster franchise. Those were just individual movies that were retroactively tied together. Each director had a distinct vision for an individual film. Todd Browning's Dracula, which was largely based on a popular play adaptation with some very long dialogue scenes, is very different from James Whale's Frankenstein, which has a visual look and faster editing style that owes more to German expressionist cinema. The characters that came from these movies existed in their own space and proved popular by their own virtue. In the MCU movies, though, the individual movies don't matter nearly as much. How many of you honestly saw Ant-Man and the Wasp? And how many of you honestly liked it? The nice thing about all two previous movies in the Unbreakable series is that they feel like films first and franchise properties second. They're individual movies that were marketed as standalone films and had to succeed as standalone films. Moreover, in Split, we see a wonderful return to form by M. Night in terms of quality. Grounded by truly fantastic lead performances from Anya Taylor-Joy and James McAvoy, Split feels a notch above the previous work. James McAvoy's character Kevin, a psychotic suffering from multiple personality disorder, takes Anya Taylor-Joy's character Casey hostage. Casey is yet another one of Shyamalan's skeptical protagonists, not knowing if Kevin can really transform himself into a superhuman entity known as the Beast. This question is finally answered at the end of the film, but the real twist, which we've implicitly spoiled here, is that Split is the sequel to Unbreakable, taking place in the same cinematic universe. And thankfully, it looks like there is a lot of promise in Glass. The cinematography and the score appear top-notch, even judging by the trailer. From what little is known about the story, we do know there is a psychiatrist who denies the existence of superhumans, so most likely we are again delving into the conflict between faith and skepticism. Hopefully, given the fact that Anya Taylor-Joy, Samuel L. Jackson, James McAvoy, and Bruce Willis are all involved, we can assume that the performances are in safe hands. Finally, it seems like there's no better time to bring back Shyamalan's take on the superhero genre, considering the genre's current popularity. As Mr. Glass explains in the Glass trailer, this is not a cartoon, this is the real world. That line characterizes M. Night's fresh take on the genre well. A genre that now feels like cartoons pushed out weekly rather than well-thought-out pieces of art that can stand up on their own. It should be exciting what ideas Shyamalan can bring to the table almost 2 decades after Unbreakable. So at the end of the day, this Indian-American director, who truly does have a distinctive style, may deserve a bit more respect than he's gotten over the past few years. Given strong collaborators, particularly actors, Shyamalan is definitely able to make movies closer to the quality of The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable than to The Last Airbender. And to be perfectly honest, if you told me a few years ago that M. Night Shyamalan would spearhead an entertaining cinematic universe, I would have called you crazy. But that's reality for you. And after over a decade of utter mediocrity, maybe, just maybe, his return to form is his greatest twist of all. My name is Emily Pinto, and this is Take Two. See you again next episode.